Dadperfectrevenge. I barely managed to keep myself from losing my temper during what was supposed to be a reconciliation dinner. I went into the kitchen just to get a glass of water, but what I saw there turned everything upside down. My name's Charles Davis. I'm 58, retired NYPD financial crimes detective. The phone rang on a Tuesday morning, and I almost didn't answer. 6 months of silence from my son, and suddenly his name flashed on my screen like a ghost from a life I used to know. Dad. Tim's voice carried that careful tone he used when he was walking on eggshells. I know we haven't talked in a while, but Patty was thinking maybe you could come over for dinner next week. The kids miss their grandpa. I stared at my coffee mug, the one that said NYPD Financial Crimes Unit, 28 years of service. A retirement gift from a life that felt more real than this conversation. The kids miss me. Of course they do. A pause. I miss you too, Dad. The last time we'd spoken, I'd questioned their lifestyle. New BMW. In the driveway, designer furniture, expensive vacations on a nonprofit salary, and software engineer wages. When I'd mentioned it, Patty had called me controlling. Tim had called me worse. What's the occasion? I asked. Does there need to be one? It's almost Christmas. Family time. Family. The word felt hollow. I thought about the $45,000 I'd lent them 2 years ago for their house down payment, still waiting on that repayment. I thought about their wedding, $28,000 I'd scraped together because every girl deserves her dream day. I thought about every time I'd put family first, only to be pushed away. Sure, I said, I'll be there. The week crawled by. I kept my routine. Morning walks through Queens, coffee at Murphy's Diner, chess with Leonard Murphy at the community center. Leo had been my partner for 15 years before moving to FBI financial crimes. Sharp mind, sharper instincts. You look worried, he said, moving his bishop. Tim invited me to dinner. He whistled low. After 6 months? What's she want? That's the question, isn't it? Leo captured my night. Charlie, I've known you since you busted the Riverside embezzlement case. You taught me to trust my gut. What's yours saying? That this isn't about the kids missing their grandpa. Then why go? I moved my rook. Because he's still my son. The night arrived cold and clear. I drove my 8-year-old Honda through streets lined with holiday lights toward the house I'd helped them buy. 482 Maple Avenue sat in Westchester's most expensive neighborhood. Houses pushing $700,000, manicured lawns, 3-car garages. Their mortgage had to be $3,800 a month minimum. On Tim's software engineer salary alone, impossible. The front door opened before I could knock. Patty stood there in a designer dress I didn't recognize, her smile bright and brittle. Charlie, you made it. She hugged me quickly. Perfume expensive and unfamiliar. The house behind her gleamed, new furniture, fresh paint, everything screaming money they shouldn't have. Tim appeared in the hallway, 6'1" of practiced charm in a custom shirt. Dad, good to see you. His handshake was firm enough to prove something. Come in, we've got quite the spread tonight. The dining room table could have fed 12. Prime rib, lobster tails, wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The kids, 7 and 5, sat quietly in clothes that still had creases from the store. This is incredible, I said, because what else could I say? Tim got a promotion, Patty said quickly, too quickly, and the foundation's doing amazing work. Heroes Hope Foundation. We raised over $380,000 this year for veterans. Prosthetics, counseling, housing assistance. Life-changing stuff. I watched her talk. This woman who'd married my son 8 years ago. Back then she'd been sweet, hard-working, grateful for every opportunity. When did the gratitude turn to entitlement? When did the warmth become calculation? That's generous, I said. Veterans deserve every bit of help they can get. My father had served in Korea, came back with pieces missing that had nothing to do with his body. He taught me about service, sacrifice, honor. Exactly. Patty leaned forward. Which is why I wanted to talk to you tonight, Charlie. We're starting a new initiative. 6 months, we could triple our impact. But funding timelines are tight, and I thought, well, you've always been generous with family. There it was. The real reason for the dinner, the smiles, the expensive food I hadn't touched. How much? I asked. $22,000, she said, as if that made it reasonable. It's tax deductible. And honestly, What else are you doing with your pension? Sitting on it while people who served our country go without. The presumption stole my breath. Tim wouldn't meet my eyes. I appreciate the opportunity. I kept my voice level. But that's not something I can do right now. Patty's smile tightened. Can't or won't? Does it matter? Tim's voice carried an edge. Patty explained the program. These are veterans who need help. I know what veterans need, I said quietly. I also know what family means, or what it used to mean. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Tim's jaw clenched. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm still waiting on the $45,000 I lent you 2 years ago. That was for your house, your future, and you were going to pay it back. We've had expenses, Patty snapped, like a life, like responsibilities you wouldn't understand. The words came out harder than I'd intended, like a 85,000 BMW. Like this house that's twice what you need? Tim stood abruptly. I think you should leave. I think I should too. I stood, my napkin falling to the floor like a white flag. As I walked toward the door, I knew what I had to do. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clear recognition of what I'd become to the people I love most. A wallet instead of family. Dad, wait, Tim called. But I was already outside. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands shaking. Not from hurt, from something. And else. A feeling I recognized from my detective days when a case finally clicked into place. Then my chest tightened, pressure spreading. I'd felt this before. Stress-induced hypertension. My doctor had warned me about confrontation. I needed water. Maybe I needed to try one more time. I got out of the car and walked back to the house. I didn't knock. The door wasn't locked. They'd left it open in their certainty I wouldn't return. The argument echoed through the foyer, Tim's voice sharp and bitter. Your father always has to make everything about him. Always the righteous cop, looking down on everyone. He just doesn't understand our situation, Patty said, softer but calculating. No, he understands perfectly. He likes keeping you dependent, control through money, classic manipulation. I stood there, hand on my chest, feeling the pressure ease slightly. Funny how anger can override physical pain. But I needed that water. My mouth tasted like copper. The kitchen sat adjacent too. The dining room through an archway. I moved quietly, my detective instincts still sharp after 3 years of retirement. In investigations, I'd learned to observe, to notice details others missed. That skill didn't retire. The kitchen was another showpiece. Granite countertops, commercial-grade appliances, pendant lights that probably cost more than my first car. And there, on the island, sat a laptop open to a spreadsheet. I wasn't snooping. I was reaching for a glass when my eyes caught the header. Heroes Hope Foundation, Financial Overview, Q320-24. 28 years in financial crimes teaches you to recognize certain patterns. Invoice discrepancies, irregular payment schedules, ghost vendors. The documents practically screamed at me. Patriot Medical Supply, $52,000. I'd never heard of them. A quick scan showed 3 more like it. Freedom Prosthetics, $67,000. Veterans First Equipment, $61,000. My hands moved on autopilot, pulling out my phone. Years of documenting evidence dies hard. I photographed the first page, then scrolled down. Bank statements showing wire transfers to accounts in Delaware, corporate havens for people hiding something. The foundation had raised $387,000. The disbursements to actual veterans? Maybe $45,000. The rest disappeared into a web of shell companies and what looked like offshore gambling accounts. My father's face flashed in my mind. How he'd struggled after Korea, waiting months for the VA to approve his disability claim. How he'd died still believing his country valued his service. Patty was stealing from people like my father. What are you doing? I turned. Patty stood in the archway, her face transitioning from confusion to alarm as she saw what I held. The laptop, her financial confession. These are private documents. She moved forward, hand outstretched. These are evidence. My voice came out flat. Detective, you've been embezzling from a veterans charity, Patty. Wire fraud, falsifying tax documents. These Delaware accounts, let me guess, you're the beneficial owner hiding behind an LLC. Her face drained of color, then flushed. You went through my things? They were sitting open on your kitchen counter where you left them because you never thought someone might actually look. Arrogance is expensive, Patty. I pulled out my phone, started dialing. What are you doing? Panic crept into her voice. Calling 911. She lunged, 5'6", 20 years younger, but desperate. I'd spent a career dealing with desperate people. I stepped aside, let her momentum carry her past me. She caught herself on the counter, breathing hard. 911. What's your emergency? This is Charles Davis, retired NYPD. I'm at 482 Maple Avenue in Westchester. I need to report financial crimes, embezzlement from a federally funded charity. I have documentary evidence. Patty's expression cycled through denial, rage, fear, calculation. Tim appeared in the doorway. Dad. Tim's eyes were red from arguing. What's happening? Your wife has been stealing. From wounded veterans, I said quietly. 387,000, give or take. That's insane. Tim's voice pitched high. Patty, he's lost his mind. He broke into our house, went through private papers. I walked through an unlocked door because I felt ill. Your papers were open on the counter, and unless I'm mistaken, Heroes Hope Foundation received federal grants last year. That makes this federal wire fraud, Tim. 5 to 20 years. The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line. I could hear sirens already. Living in Westchester had its advantages. Response times averaged under 4 minutes. Tim looked between us, his world fracturing in real time. Patty, is this true? Of course not, baby. She grabbed his arm. He's lying. He's angry because we wouldn't let him control our lives anymore. The bank statements show wire transfers totaling $342,000 to Delaware shell corporations, I said, still holding my phone up. The invoices are fraudulent. I can tell because Patriot Medical Supply lists an address that's actually a UPS store in Newark. I investigated cases like this for 3 decades, Tim. I know what I'm seeing. He stepped back from Patty like she'd become radioactive. You promised those funds were going to veterans. You stood in front of the Rotary Club and talked about the Marine who lost both legs. I helped people, Patty's voice cracked. We did help people. Maybe I took some operational costs, but operational costs don't hide in Delaware LLCs, I said. Red and blue lights washed through the kitchen windows. Patty looked at the door, at me, at Tim. I watched the calculation happen. Run, fight, deflect. She chose deflect. This is persecution, she said, voice suddenly calm, controlled. You've wanted me gone since day one, Charlie. You can't stand that Tim chose me, that we built something you couldn't control. Now you're weaponizing your old cop buddies to destroy us. Smart, establishing the narrative before the police arrived. But I'd seen that trick dozens of times. The doorbell rang. Tim didn't move, so I walked past him, past Patty's silent rage, and opened it. Leonard Murphy stood there in a suit, his FBI shield clipped to his belt. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers from Westchester PD. Charlie, he took in the scene with experienced eyes. You sounded serious on the dispatch. Financial fraud, I said. Embezzlement from a federally funded veterans charity. I have photos of the evidence. It was in plain sight when I entered the kitchen. Leo's expression didn't change, but I saw the shift in his posture. All business now? And the subject? Patricia Davis. She's the director of Heroes Hope Foundation. Leo nodded to the uniforms who moved past me. Patty had her phone out, probably texting her lawyer. Tim stood frozen, his designer shirt suddenly looking like a costume. Mrs. Davis. Leo's voice carried authority earned over 2 decades. I'm Special Agent Murphy, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I need to ask you some questions about Heroes Hope Foundation. I want my lawyer, Patty said immediately. That's your right. Leo turned to me. Charlie, I'll need those photos and we'll need your statement. I handed him my phone, watched his eyes move across the screen, seeing what I'd seen. 28 years working together. We didn't need words. We'll need to secure these materials as evidence, Leo said. Mrs. Davis, are you the owner of the LLCs listed in these Delaware filings? Lawyer, Patty repeated. Okay. Leo gestured to the officers. We're seizing these materials as evidence of potential federal crimes. Mrs. Davis, you're not under arrest at this time, but I strongly suggest you remain available for questioning. Tim finally found his voice. This is a mistake. There's an explanation. There usually is, one of the officers said. not unkindly. He began photographing the laptop screen, then carefully collecting documents into evidence bags. Tim realized the truth. The grandfather clock in their foyer, probably worth 8,000, chimed 9 times. 9 o'clock on a night that started with prime rib and ended with police evidence bags. Patty's eyes found mine. Pure hatred, unfiltered. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But those veterans won't. Leo touched my arm. Let's get your statement outside. I followed him into the December cold, leaving Tim standing in his magazine-perfect kitchen, finally understanding what his wife really was and what his father had always been. The next week passed in a blur of statements, interviews, and phone calls I didn't want to answer. Leo kept me updated. The FBI had taken over the case. Federal prosecutors were building their file. Forensic accountants were tracing every dollar Patty had touched. The machine I'd once been part of was grinding forward, methodical and relentless. But this time, I wasn't running it. I was just a witness, waiting to see if justice would work the way it was supposed to. Tim didn't call. I told myself I expected that. I was lying. My neighbor, Dorothy Brown, knocked on my door that Saturday morning with a casserole I didn't need, and concern I probably did. She'd been a nurse for 40 years before retiring, which meant she could read vital signs even when people thought they were hiding them. "You look terrible," she said, pushing past me into my kitchen. "Good morning to you too, Dot. Don't sass me, Charlie Davis." She set the casserole on my counter. "The whole neighborhood's talking. Margaret saw the FBI at your son's house. Said there were evidence boxes, small towns and wealthy suburbs. Same gossip, different property values." "It's complicated," I said. "It always is." She poured herself coffee without asking. Settled into my breakfast nook like she owned it. "You want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Then I'll talk and you'll listen." She sipped her coffee, grimaced at my cheap brand. "I've known Tim since he was 8 years old, playing in your backyard after your wife passed. Sweet boy, smart. Then he married that Patty, and I watched him. Change. Little things at first. Less time for friends, expensive car he couldn't afford, that smile that never quite reached his eyes anymore. I sat down across from her. Outside, December snow had started falling, soft and quiet. "Sometimes people become who they marry," Dorothy continued. "Sometimes they were always that person, just waiting for permission. Which is he? I don't know anymore. Yes, you do. You're just afraid of the answer." The coffee tasted bitter. Or maybe that was just my mood. My phone buzzed, a text from Leo. "Call me when you can." Developments, I excused myself. Stepped into my study. Dialed. "We arrested her this morning," Leo said without preamble. "Federal charges, wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying tax documents. Bail set at $250,000. I absorbed that. $250,000. Patty didn't have that kind of cash. Not the legitimate kind anyway. How'd she take it? Like a woman who thought money could buy her out of anything. Leo's tone was dry. "Her lawyers, already calling it a witch hunt. Claims you have a personal vendetta, that the evidence was obtained illegally. I didn't break into their house. I know. The prosecutor knows. But expect them to fight dirty. Patty's hired Timothy Carter. $500 an hour minimum with a reputation for turning juries against prosecutors instead of defendants. That would cost her $40,000 just for pre-trial work. Yeah, well, desperate people make expensive decisions," Leo said. A pause. "Charlie, there's something else?" Tim posted bail. The words hit harder than they should have. "How?" "Sold her jewelry. Got a loan against his 401k. She's standing by him publicly, calling it a witch hunt. Says you've always been controlling, that you couldn't handle their success." I looked out my window at the snow, watched it cover everything in white, making the world look clean when it wasn't. "He really believes her?" I said. "Or he's invested too much to admit he was wrong. 8 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house he helped. Pay for with money he thought was legitimate. Tough to walk away from that." After we hung up, I sat in my study for a long time. This room held my career, plaques from the NYPD, a letter from the mayor thanking me for my service, photographs of cases won and criminals convicted, 28 years of believing in justice. But justice for my own son felt like failure. The trial came 8 months later. Federal courthouse, Judge Morrison presiding. I sat with Leo watching justice unfold. The prosecutor's opening was devastating. Patricia Davis stole $387,000 from wounded veterans through systematic fraud. The trial lasted 6 days. FBI accountants traced every dollar through offshore accounts. $184,000 lost to online gambling sites. A whistleblower accountant testified about processing fraudulent invoices. I chose comfort over conscience until I couldn't sleep at night, she said. When I confronted Patricia, she fired me and threatened to destroy my career. 4 veterans testified. Thomas Martinez rolled into court in his wheelchair. I applied for a specialized chair, $3,200, denied twice, while Patricia bought luxury cars with foundation money. Sandra Brooks came with her service dog. My application for mobility equipment, $2,800, denied 3 times. I wore an ill-fitting prosthetic for 2 years, got infections, nerve damage. Roberto Santos showed a photograph. That's me at 22 in Afghanistan. Patricia denied my housing assistance, $4,600. I lived in my car for 3 months. Ruth Hensley, a woman in her 70s, clutched a folder. Her son Daniel had been denied medical equipment worth $8,000. He died waiting. She took my future, Ruth said quietly, my grandchildren who will never exist. Tim took the stand on day 5. I knew nothing about the foundation finances. I trusted my wife completely. His voice cracked when the prosecutor asked about their divorce. My marriage collapsed when I realized who I'd really married. She chose stealing over honesty. There's nothing convenient about realizing you lived with someone capable of that. When asked why he'd posted bail, Tim met my eyes across the courtroom. I thought I owed her that much. I was wrong about a lot of things. Patty didn't testify. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive father-in-law, but the evidence spoke for itself. $387,000 stolen, lives destroyed. Veterans denied help while she lived in luxury. The jury deliberated 9 hours, guilty on 12 counts. As marshals led her away, she looked at Tim with pure accusation. He didn't flinch. Outside, Tim found me by my car. "Dad, you don't need to say anything." "Yes, I do." His eyes were red. "You were right about everything. The money, the lifestyle, her. I chose her lies over your truth because facing the truth meant admitting I'd been played for years. I thought about my father, about what he would have wanted. Justice? Yes, but also family. "You're still my son," I said. He broke down then, really broke down. Can I come home for a while, figure things out? The kids and I, we don't have anywhere else to go. You don't have to ask. You're always welcome. Patty was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, full restitution of $387,000. Timothy Carter had argued for leniency, claimed family hardship, but Judge Morrison wasn't buying it. "You stole from people who sacrificed everything for this country," he said. "The court finds no mitigating circumstances that justify what you did." 6 months later, we had Sunday dinner at my place. Simple food, honest conversation. Tim was rebuilding, working through the divorce, learning to trust his instincts again. The kids, Emma and Jake, came every weekend, filling my house with noise and life I'd been missing. Tim had lost the house in Westchester. Too many memories, too much debt. He'd found a modest apartment 10 minutes away, started over with a clear conscience and a smaller bank account. The restructured Heroes Hope Foundation thrived under new leadership, with me advising on oversight and financial controls. We approved applications Patty had denied and funded new initiatives. Thomas Martinez got his specialized wheelchair. Sandra Brooks received proper prosthetics. Roberto Santos found stable housing. Ruth Hensley attended the foundation's anniversary dinner. "You gave my son justice," she told me. "That's all a mother can ask for." The donations kept coming from people inspired by the story, wanting to help veterans who'd been denied assistance. One evening, working in my small garden behind the house, Tim helped me plant bulbs for spring. Emma and Jake chased each other around the yard, their laughter echoing off the neighboring houses. I realized something had changed. I'd started this journey angry, betrayed, dismissed by my own family. Now I felt something different, not just peace, but purpose. Justice had been served. My relationship with Tim was stronger than before, built on truth instead of lies. The grandchildren I'd feared losing were part of my daily life. Veterans were being helped by a foundation that actually cared about them. Patty would spend the next 12 years in federal prison, learning that stealing from heroes has consequences. Her lawyer had filed appeals, but Leo said they wouldn't stick. The evidence was too solid, the crime too clear. Tim looked up at me, dirt on his hands from planting daffodil bulbs. "Dad, will these really grow?" "Yes," I said. "They need time and care, but they'll bloom in spring, just like families, just like justice, just like redemption. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything you think you want. But if you're patient, if you stick to your principles, you get back something better than what you lost. Not the same, never the same, but real, honest, built on truth instead of comfortable lies. And that's worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. Trust your gut when family acts differently. Money changes people, but principles don't have to change you. When you see fraud, report it. Protecting criminals never protects the people you really love.